Our story unfolds in Stockholm, Sweden, on the 2nd of August, 2018. In the Swedish suburb of Vasastan lived Erik Torell, a young man remembered as a gentle soul who adored his family. Erik had Down syndrome, a genetic condition affecting his growth and cognitive abilities. At 20 years of age, Erik functioned at the developmental level of a 3-year-old. A concurrent diagnosis of autism rendered him nonverbal. The only sound he could make was the word mum. His mother would later reflect, Erik had no concept of danger. He operated from a baseline belief that everyone in the world was kind. His conditions meant Erik lived a sheltered life at home under his parents' constant care, but on Wednesday, the 1st of August, he ventured out for an adventure of his own. In the middle of the night, Erik slipped quietly out the front door. He was not permitted to go anywhere alone, but it wasn't the first time. He had managed to get outside without anyone realizing. Before leaving, Erik selected a toy gun from his collection of playthings. In the pre-dawn hours of the following morning, Erik's mother awoke to the terrifying realization that he was gone. She instantly roused her husband, and they phoned the police to report him missing, providing crucial details about his appearance and his diminished mental capacity. The moment she ended the call, the couple hastily dressed and raced into the streets to begin their own search. They knew Erik's condition meant he couldn't have traveled far and expected to find him quickly, but that hope would tragically be misplaced. Around 4 a.m. that morning, 3 officers were dispatched to a residential courtyard following reports of a disturbance. Callers had stated that a man was brandishing a gun and behaving in an aggressive manner. When the officers arrived on the scene, they shouted at the man to drop his weapon. When their commands were met with silence, they yelled again, but the man remained completely unresponsive. The man, of course, was Erik. Police opened fire, and it wasn't just a warning shot or two. A barrage of rounds was unleashed upon him. In total, authorities fired more than 25 shots in Erik's direction. Witnesses would later testify that it was like a storm of bullets. At 5:45 on that Thursday morning, Erik was pronounced dead on sight. The shooting of Erik Torell ignited a national outcry in Sweden. Vigils and memorials were organized across the country as many citizens demanded a reevaluation of the use of lethal force within law enforcement. Sweden is home to a population of approximately 10 million. In the preceding 20 years, fatal police shootings averaged only 1 per year, but in 2018, that number disturbingly leaped to 6. To put that in perspective, the UK has 6 times the population, yet sees only 4 to 6 such deaths annually from police shootings. As the incident gained traction in the press, the officers involved reportedly defended their actions by insisting that Erik had been acting menacingly. They maintained that he represented a danger to the public and was ignoring their commands. But Erik's mother, Katarina, flatly rejected their version of events. She argued that police should have recognized that Erik had Down syndrome, that there was no conceivable way he could have been perceived as a threat. She said he wasn't capable of being threatening. The only thing he could do was hug and kiss. He was the kindest and most peaceful teddy bear in the world. There was also a problem with the official police statements. Initial media reports indicated that officers had shot Erik 3 times in the stomach. But that narrative did not align with the forensic evidence. A post-mortem examination was performed on Erik, and the results confirmed he had been shot 3 times, but 2 of the bullets had entered through his back. The location of the bullet wounds would become a pivotal factor in the case. If the officer's account was accurate, and they fired on Erik because he posed an imminent threat, then logic dictates the wounds would be on his front. To have been shot in the back implied he was turned away from them at some point. In fact, one of the bullets to his back was the one that killed him, which proved he was still alive when he turned around. The physical evidence strongly suggested that the officers had been less than forthcoming in their statements, which raised serious doubts about whether the shooting was justified at all. Officials reviewing the incident agreed that enough questions existed to merit a full-scale inquiry, and the Swedish police authority launched an investigation. The officers involved were immediately suspended from duty while the circumstances of the shooting were subjected to intense scrutiny. Ultimately, the investigation concluded that the police were, in fact, justified in opening fire on Eric. The findings determined there was no way for them to know the gun was a toy or that Eric's developmental disabilities were a contributing factor. Added to this was the fact that their training mandated that they neutralize a threat in the most efficient manner available. In other words, shoot to kill. A Swedish officer later told reporters, The goal was to press the attack until the subject could no longer harm anyone. If lethal force was required to achieve that, then it was a necessary measure. The kind of ammunition carried by the Swedish police is also a critical factor in this case. The rounds are designed to expand upon impact, causing massive and immediate trauma intended to neutralize a target on the spot. The investigation also concluded the officers should have ceased firing the moment Eric turned away from them, as at that juncture, he presented a minimal threat, and there was no justification to continue the assault. Had they stopped shooting then, Eric might very well have survived. The report's author noted, I have concluded that the police failed to adhere to the procedures they were supposed to follow, and if they had, they would have seen that Eric, the victim, posed no threat. Following this investigation, 2 officers involved were charged with negligence and misconduct, while a third faced charges for causing another person's death. However, other officers at the scene were not charged. At the trial, the officers offered more detail about the chaotic situation in the early morning hours. They testified that their first sight of Eric led them to believe he was a wanted fugitive who had viciously assaulted his partner and threatened her life. They had no idea the actual perpetrator was already in custody because the arrest information had not yet been updated in their patrol car computers. So when they arrived and saw Eric holding what appeared to be a firearm, they were certain it was their suspect. Just before the confrontation, the officers had a brief encounter with Eric's father, who was out searching for his son. They exchanged a few words, but no one realized Eric was the reason for the police presence. The officers also contested the forensic evidence regarding the placement and sequence of the shots that ended Eric's life. They argued there was no definitive way to know Eric's body position at the moment he was hit. Despite the bullets entering his back, they maintained their justification, stating that police officers must make split-second choices to ensure public safety, and that was exactly what they were doing. In October of 2019, all 3 officers were acquitted of every charge. They were subsequently cleared to return to duty. Eric's family disagreed with the judgment, but ultimately accepted it. Eric's mother called her son a wonderful and the most loving person in the world. She said, "We are utterly shattered. We're in a state of shock. I can't accept that this is real. Why did they have to kill him? Why not just shoot him in the shaft? Foot? I pray that we learn from this and look forward to what must be changed to better protect all our children and young adults with developmental disabilities who are living out in the world with us." The story of Eric is a deeply painful one. It has prompted many to demand reforms that stress de-escalation and crisis intervention skills, especially when interacting with individuals who have disabilities. It is an especially bitter tragedy to realize that an object as harmless as a toy gun could set off the cascade of events that culminated in his premature death.